Hey guys, welcome back to the course. Now, let's start to play around with navigation for a bit. And in this section, we're going to be building basically our two main screens, let's say, of our application that we will use to kind of navigate backwards and forwards between them. And we will focus mostly on navigation. Now, this is going to be a simple example of how you would use navigation. And I've deliberately chosen this simple example to kind of illustrate the principles behind navigation and how you would implement them. But however, the same principles, the same kind of structure of your code, you would use it if you would have multiple fragments. Okay, so as Google recommends, we have a application that has one activity and multiple fragments. So it will switch between different fragments within the same activity. And that is done the same way, whether you have 2 fragments or 100 fragments. Okay, the only difference is the kind of graph of the connections between the fragments, but the actual code that you use to go from one fragment to another will be the same. So this simple example that we use is quite important in the sense that it does present all the principles that you would need to know in order to implement navigation in your app. So let's go ahead and create a few things that we're gonna need. So let's open up the Java, resource, let's say source code folder. So we have main activity here. And before we do anything else, I just want to create 2 more packages here. Actually, maybe 3. So let's go ahead and right click, new package. And I'm gonna call this package model. Okay, we're gonna create a new package that I'm gonna call view, and a new package that I'm gonna call view model. And you might notice that these names are not random, okay? These names are basically what we're gonna be using to build our MVVM architecture, okay? MVVM architecture means model, view, view model. So we have our 3 packages here that will contain the files for model, for the view, and for the view model. Now, first thing I'm going to do, main activity in this architecture is part of the view. Okay, it's not going to contain any business logic. It's not going to contain any data. It's just going to contain things that the user can see. So what I want to do here, I'm going to click on it, drag it inside the view package. Okay, and we see a refactoring pop-up here. We just simply click refactor, and that should be everything we need to do. All right, so we have our main activity in the right place. What we're going to do now is we're going to create 2 fragments. Okay, so I'm going to right click on the view package, new, go down to fragment, and select fragment blank. Okay, that's going to create a blank fragment, and I'm going to call this list fragment, because this is the fragment that will contain the list of dogs that we will display, that we will retrieve from the backend. We will display inside this list fragment. Now, we want the create layout XML, so have that checked. The fragment layout name, that is fine. However, we do not want factory methods and we do not want callbacks. We just want a blank empty fragment. Make sure the source language is set to Kotlin, and then click finish. Now, this just created a new fragment class for us. It just added a couple of parameters that we don't actually need, so I'm just going to remove that. And that is pretty much it. Now, if I control or command click on this, so if I press the command key, because I'm on a Mac, but if you press the control key if you're on a PC, then you will have this highlighted. And if we click on it, it will just open the fragment layout for us. All right, so we have a fragment layout. Now we're going to create a new fragment blank. And this one we're going to call detail fragment. So this fragment will contain the details about a certain dog or dog breed, right? When we click on it in the list, we will go to this fragment and show more information about it. Again, we want a layout. We are happy with the name. We don't want these factory methods or the callbacks, and we are using Kotlin as the language. And click Finish. And again, remove the extra parameters that the system puts in for us. All right, so let's go ahead and set up a bit our navigation, okay? Right, so first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna open the fragment list. All right, we're going to remove the text view, okay? We are in the text tab here. You also have the design tab, but we're gonna work on the text tab for now. The reason why is because we want to put a layout at the beginning here. So before your frame layout, okay, or whatever your system generated, we're going to put a layout tag. And this layout tag actually needs to contain this XML namespace, okay? So we're gonna move these two lines to the layout, and I'm gonna close the layout tag. And you can see the system generated an end tag for us that I'm gonna cut and paste right at the bottom. And I want to have this formatted, so I'm gonna hit Command Option L or Control Alt L if you're on a PC, and just format that nicely so it shows up in the right way. Now this layout tag is part of navigation, and this tells the system that, look, this fragment, this XML layout is part of my navigation and I will need it later on. So this layout allows us to tell the system that here we want this fragment to be part of our navigation framework. Now let's do the same thing for fragment detail. So I'm gonna remove the text view. I'm gonna create a layout tag. I'm gonna move the namespaces, close the tag, move the tag, the end tag to the bottom, and format, okay? So so now we have both fragments have a layout, okay? Both fragments have a layout. Now let's open up another layout file. So I'm gonna hit double shift and I'm gonna say activity_main. Okay, and I'm gonna open this main file. Okay, now I've removed the text view there. And here, if we go in the design view, okay, we can search here at the top and we have a nav host fragment, okay, nav host fragment. So let's click on that and move it to our layout. Actually, before we do that, because we need to actually create the navigation. So let's cancel that for now. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go into my project structure and I'm gonna right click on this res folder. I'm gonna say new, Android resource file, okay? And I'm gonna give it the name navigation. And you see here you have a resource type that's currently set to values. I don't want values. If I click on that, I'm gonna get navigation. So I actually want a navigation resource file. Let's actually give this a different name. Let's call this dog_navigation, okay? Because it refers to dogs. Now in a large project, you might want to give this a more significant name. But for the purposes of this application, this should be fine. So I'm gonna click OK. And here we see that we have our navigation structure. Now here is where we create our navigation graph. So it says to start, we just need to add a destination. So I'm gonna click on this add a destination icon. And I'm gonna go down to my list fragment and select that. So we can see that we have a list fragment kind of element here, and I'm going to do that again for the detail fragment. Now what I would like in my application is to be able to navigate from the list fragment to the detail fragment, and that means basically I'm going to click on this kind of hook point here, click and drag to my new detail fragment. And this basically creates an action, okay? An action is basically a transition, let's say, that you can set to go from one fragment to another. And for now, we're just going to leave it like that, but only change the ID. So instead of action, whatever is named here, I'm going to call it action. Let me see if I can remove that. Action detail fragment. Because this basically goes from my list fragment to my detail fragment. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the detail fragment. I'm going to click on the handler here and drag this line to my list fragment. And this symbolizes the fact that I can have a action that takes me from the detail fragment to the list fragment. And let's rename this as well. I'm going to say action list fragment. I think that's pretty much it. Yes, detail fragment, list fragment. Okay, so this is our navigation graph. Now, if you have multiple fragments, eventually in our course we will add another fragment here. But if you have multiple fragments, this is where you kind of define the relationships between the fragments and how you would go from one to another. Okay, but for now, we only have 2 fragments that have 2 actions. Okay, that is all we need for now. Okay, so going back to main activity or activity underscore main layout, we still have the nav host fragment here. So if we click and drag it now, we will see that we have a suggestion for a navigation. Okay, so I'm going to click OK on that. All right, so this has expanded to fill the whole screen, but we still have an issue here, and it says this view is not constrained. The reason why we get this error is because we actually have a constraint layout, so we need constraints for our nav host fragment. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to go to this kind of magic wand icon here. If I click on that, I'm going to get all the constraints I need. Okay, so that error has disappeared. And what that magic wand does, okay, it's not actually magic. It basically created these constraints. Okay, what these say is the end of my fragment goes to the end of my parent. The top of my fragment goes to the top of my parent, and so on and so forth. And it also created some margins, okay, because it's a nice idea to leave some space at the edges of our screen. Okay, so what we have now is a main activity that contains a host for our navigation, okay? And in our host navigation, we relate to our navigation graph, okay? And our navigation graph, we have it here in the project, all right? Our navigation graph basically consists of 2 destinations, okay, 2 targets. One list fragment that has an action to go to detail fragment, and one detail fragment that can go back to list fragment. Now, of course, this is also an XML, so if we click on text, we can see the definitions here. If you learn these by heart, you can write them yourself, but sometimes it's easier to just work with the design view. All right, so what we're going to be doing in the next lectures is we're going to be adding buttons, a button for the list fragment and a button for the detail fragment. And we will use these buttons to activate the actions that we define here and move from one screen to another. But for now, in this lecture, that is pretty much enough. That's all we're going to do for now. And we will continue this in the next few lectures. So I will see you there.